Matthew, how are you doing today, man?
Man, I'm fantastic. I want everybody just to start this off. One, Andreas is he's very gracious because this was supposed to be at 6 p.m. tonight, and I got our times mixed up. And I literally sent him a message, and in 20 seconds he replied and goes, "All right, let me shift it up." So a very gracious man who is quick on his feet. So cheers to you. Thank you.
Hey, man. Thank you for that. And as I mentioned to you, it just keeps me on my toes, and it's a good experience to improvise
Mm,
when things change in life, right? Sometimes we schedule what we need to do in the day, what are the priorities, but things always change
yeah.
when you have a plan, and being able to adapt is key to success. So that's why the moment you told me 9 a.m., I saw it as an opportunity. So, of growth, it sort of be uncomfortable a little bit. So I actually appreciate that on your end. So,
Exactly.
Matthew, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your growing food journey, and maybe where you're from, just so that the people listening could get to know you a little bit.
Sure. My name is Matthew Nadu. I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm actually from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it's interesting because most of my life I wanted to get out of Lancaster. It's where all the Amish are. Grew up drinking raw milk. My dad had an awesome garden. We had fruit trees. Uh, but for me, where I grew up, it was like you want to get out of that. Like you don't want to be a farmer, like a traditional farmer. Like our school was kind of split between like the redneck kids and then all the kids that just wore like all the trendier kids that wanted to move to the city or go to college and do all these other things were too good for blue collar. So I definitely fell on that line. I lived in Philadelphia for 10 years. I was a sports reporter at NBC, and then I did a lot of hosting at CBS there. And I shifted into entertainment. Entertainment, I worked a lot on like documentaries. And then I really started getting into uh, not only producing but acting as well. So I moved to Los Angeles. When I got to Los Angeles, I kind of it was amazing. I'm so glad that I moved to California. I was 30 when I moved, and I always said I was going to get out of Pennsylvania, and so I was in New York or Los Angeles for 8 years. And in that, with that journey, I really started to not connect with the industry, but really in creating content, in adventure travel, um, the power of social media and what content looks like. And I really started connecting and relating to people that were growing food for some reason. Like good friends of mine, Molly Engelhart runs Sage. She was pretty big in the news not too long ago because her vegan restaurants, her and her brother Ryan, they have Cafe Gratitude and Sage. They're very like grow food. They have this documentary Kiss the Ground. They got like all this stuff that they're working with, and they're really crushing it. And I was very intrigued by not only are they growing food, but how they capture that content wise. And Molly was in the news because she started shifting in 2020. They moved out like I did of Los Angeles. We moved out during the pandemic, and she started doing regenerative agriculture. So then I started looking into this, and in 2020 when everything kind of collapsed, I was living on a sailboat, and I hit this moment where I was asking God, I'm like, hey, should I stay in entertainment? What should I do? It was like the beginning of the year. It was actually New Year's. And in that first week, I booked 3 national commercials. Now, 3 national commercials are like, dude, you're set, you're gold, right? Residuals, you're like awesome. They were like two big car commercials and an alcohol commercial. And shot it, and everything was ready to rock and roll. And it's kind of like what you said, just like that, the pandemic hit. Nobody was out adventuring. No one was doing anything. The commercials got canned, and nothing came through. And I had this moment on my sailboat. So I was living on it, and I just like went down into the hall, and I just screamed. I was like, God, I don't know what you want me to do. Like I did all this work, everything was set up, and now it's falling apart. And I think that was a pivotal moment for me because I met my wife shortly after. Within a year, we were married and moved from California to Florida. Got out of entertainment, got my permaculture, my PDC, and I got that up in the mountains of California in 2020 because everything kind of hit, when shit hits the fan, it didn't matter who you were. Like everybody had to wait in line at Costco. Everybody was in those 2-hour lines with the mask. Like I just found videos the other day where I'm just showing everybody with masks and you're just weaving back and forth. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, why are people wearing masks outside? Like, why are we like cattle herding through here? Why is everybody like, oh, I need to comply, I need to comply? And I met my
6 feet
wife, and
apart.
yeah, 6 feet. But anyway, I pushed back from that from the very beginning, and I felt like a huge outsider there. Then they were pushing the shots, they were pushing all this stuff, and my wife and I, we got married in 2020, and I had 2 stepsons, and in that, it was trying to create a balance of seeing the need of asking questions and seeing actually what is happening, and then trying to balance that with raising boys and not being that guy that's the outsider or pushing my opinion on them. So a lot of things for me was like the sensory of like, hey, if you're looking on the beach, all these homeless people are still here. They've been here for 4 months and apparently everybody is dead. So why are they still alive? They're not washing hands, they're shooting up, they're junkies, you know what I mean? They're fighting, they're bleeding, and picking up cigarettes off the ground. Why are we not studying these people to figure out what's going on if there actually is something? So I could balance that, and then really the reality of going back to the line to Costco, like didn't matter how much food or how much money you had. If you weren't growing food, you're not growing food. You don't have food. And then I saw this whole supply chain thing. And I'm like, wow, how easy is it for society just to collapse? And that's what really shifted me into taking my PDC. It's what I met my wife, and she's absolutely incredible. And we got married back in Lancaster in 2021. We snuck in, did a little private wedding, and we decided, like, hey, let's get out of California. It's too much going on here. They're pushing too much agendas. Let's go somewhere tropical. My wife's from the Philippines, which is amazing because she'd grow anything there. So for us, she wanted to be by the coast. So we're like in the Sarasota area of Florida. And then we got here and we're like, all right, let's start growing. So that's where we are right now. And I went from, entertainment. When I got here, I took a tech job. I was running social media and doing like conferences for an NFT company. I was working in crypto for a while, but it was just soul sucking and draining. And I'm pushing this stuff that is honestly the dumbest shit. And a lot of that, the company, I guess it was a good idea, but you basically bring your physical assets, you turn it into an NFT and you bring it onto the blockchain as like a physically backed NFT. So that means I can trade my car around the world, like collectibles or whatever, and you don't have to actually have it. You get the NFT, but it's being held at like a Christie's like warehouse. And then, then you can trade it all over. You don't have to worry about tax and all this stuff. But then I saw Larry Fink from BlackRock talking about this is the future, assets on chain. And you start hearing you'll own nothing and be happy. And I'm like, oh, I'm helping usher in the new world order. So I shifted from that to growing food. And I happened to move into this area where I'm at now, and Pete from Green Dreams was a huge inspiration for us. If you haven't watched Green Dreams TV, Pete's awesome, kind of a food forest pioneer down here in Florida. But one of his biggest projects is a guy that lives 2 doors down from me. So I'm watching all these videos. I'm like, wow, like he's talking about this, the best microclimate to grow in Florida, and I live like 2,000 feet from this guy. So my mind started like really spinning about how do we grow food? How do we be not self-sufficient for the sake of sovereignty? And we need to, become, my family, it's just me and guns and growing food. But it was more of community. It was more of really leaning into my faith and thinking of, when God calls us in Genesis to be stewards of the land, what does that mean? Does that mean we just take everything? Or does that mean that we, we take what nature is and we help excel it, whether it's through centropic agroforestry or creating food forests? And how do we help rebuild soil? How do we do all these types of things? So that's where I am right now. and then you can go with any questions. But that's a quick 5 minute journey of where we are. So my wife and I are here. We have our first baby coming. We were just talking about like homesteads and families. We have our first child for us coming, a little baby boy. So I have two stepsons. So been showing them how to grow food and how to plant as I'm learning as well. And I think the one cool thing is if you're afraid to do any of this stuff, like just if you work with children, they're like sponges. They want to learn stuff. So I'll watch a video of something or have an idea and I'll show my son how to do it and he picks up on it right away. And to him, he's learning something. To me, I have confidence that, oh man, we can do this and we're actually bonding. So this has been a huge thing for me as a stepfather and an upcoming father of our own child to really learn how to bond with kids, especially as a stepdad. If you didn't raise these children, from the beginning to have your impact without trying to push, 10 years lost, on that child.
Man, Matthew, thank you for that intro. I think that it's whoever listens to this is going to really, want them to listen to the entire podcast because that was an awesome intro. So many things that people could relate to. I related to many of the things that you mentioned when I was younger. When I was in my early 20s, I wanted to do documentaries. I actually
Mm,
left a banking job that I had. I was making pretty good money as a 20-year-old at that time, and I actually quit. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna go do documentaries. But after a couple of years trying it, I realized how wicked the industry is, and I was like, no, I don't want to pursue this in the long
mm,
run. But now looking back, I would say it was probably more lack of discipline why I left.
mm.
So I can't say that it was really because of that. I have
Yeah,
to be honest with myself.
it's good insight. I've been there where I try to justify like, oh, the industry or this, and then I just realized that was the excuse to make myself feel better for not doing what I said I was going to do.
Well, I have to be honest because at the end of the day, you could find positive things in any industry, right? Any industry that you work on, there's going to be bad and good, negative things, positive things. So it's really you and how you use it, right? Because there's
Mm,
many people doing documentaries
mm,
or even music, TV, whatever, movies. It doesn't matter what it is that is positive, that has a building message to it. So
sure.
looking back at it, now I know that it wasn't really because of that. It was just me being lazy at that moment.
Yeah.
But I really relate to that. But then what really stood out to me was your 2020. You were living in the sailboat, and New Year's hit, and you book three national commercials. So you're thinking, okay, now my life is about to start. Having
Yeah.
success, and then the pandemic hits, and everything fell through. And I was like, wow, completely different situations, but very similar because
Yeah.
I actually went back to school when I was in 2014, 2015. I started at 2015 actually, and I went to school for biomedical engineering here in South Florida at FIU. So I
Mm,
finished December 2019. So now I'm an engineer, and I'm
yeah.
thinking I'm gonna make so much money. I had my job already. I had a already an engineering job, so I'm thinking that's it. I'm gonna start doing big things. And 3 months later, the pandemic hits, and same thing as you, it started opening my eyes to so many different things. Really, what is important? How you mentioned society could collapse at any moment, and I don't even know how to grow food. Well, how am I going, if I want to have a family in the future, how am I going to support them if I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be the, provider of the family? Because I do believe in the family structure, how the Bible
Mhm,
shows it, right? And the man is supposed to provide and protect.
mhm.
And when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I don't
Yeah.
even know how to grow a seed. So that's when I also, maybe you knew from before, but I didn't know anything about growing food up until 2020. And that's
Well,
when I
my
started.
dad was always growing food, but I was too busy playing sports or doing whatever, Like my dad be like, "Hey, look," and I'm like throwing the baseball with my brother, and he's just like, "Okay, whatever." So
Okay,
now
but at
I'm
least
calling
you
my dad
had
all the
some
time.
intro.
Yeah, but
So
I
yeah,
didn't
that's when
see
I
the value.
started.
I didn't see the value.
Okay, okay. Well, I didn't see the anything related to growing food really, because I grew up in the city my whole life.
Mm.
I'm originally from Colombia, Cartagena, which is a tourist location. Now you could grow anything there because it's tropical all
Yep.
year round, but
Yep.
it's more of a tourist destination, right? Going to the beach and partying and just enjoying yourself. So that to me was never a thing growing up. And then coming to South Florida when I was a teenager, living in the city, you don't really get taught that. But anyways, that really resonated with me because it was very similar. Then after that, I started trying to learn, you know. And hey, congratulations on your first baby coming.
Thank you.
And as you mentioned, teaching children how to grow food is such a beautiful experience. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I always try to um, start seeds with them, and they love it. Just putting the soil in the seed trays and then getting the seeds, putting
Mhm.
them there, watering it. So it is such a bonding experience.
Mhm.
But the best part is that through the whole process, they through the whole agricultural process, it translates into real life skills and character building. So it's something that a lot of people could use growing food and homesteading projects
Mhm.
to teach their children important lessons in life, like patience, hard work, working together, right? Because it's a lot easier to do a project with two, three, four people than it is by yourself.
Yep.
So so many things that we could translate from homesteading and growing food, man.
Yeah.
I love
It's
that.
even just being barefoot. We're barefoot all the time, hands in the soil. And I think it's such a huge thing where I mean, I don't need to get into it, but RFK is really blowing up for a lot of us who already knew it, but for people like, man, hey, our food industry is trash. It's poison. It's like when I go to the grocery store with my son, he's 13. I'll walk him down the aisle and I'll be like, all right, let's go to the medicine aisle, right? And I love how they have a health section. So that's a health section. What's the rest of the grocery store, right? But we'll go to the medicine aisle and I'll take a look. I'll look at all this stuff. Cartoons on boxes, all dyes in it, all everything's trash, right? Then I'll go, now turn around, and exact opposite is where all the candy is. And I go, now why would they put the candy and the medicine in the same aisle? Well, while the mom's looking for medicine for the kid, he's looking at the candy. They're getting the same stuff that's poisoning. You know what I mean? It's just this reciprocal cycle. And I worked in the news for years, and we don't need to get into how only a few companies run everything. But that was a huge awakening for me when I was like 22. I was working at the news. I was very frustrated about what was going on. I thought I was supposed to be not biased. And I had one of the overnight writers that worked on the overnight was like, hey, just follow the money. You'll never be a good journalist until you just start to follow the money. And so for the last like 16, 17 years, I've been following the money, and it gets very overwhelming of it seems like all is lost. And we start seeing all these world global agendas, and like it gets frustrating when we're here in Florida and I go to the farmer's market and it's food from Ecuador, it's food from Guatemala, it's food from El Salvador, from Mexico, and it's like all these fruits that we can grow here. I'm like, why are we importing all this stuff? Why are we not just growing this stuff here? So we take those seeds and we plant them, and stuff starts to grow. And I think a big thing is we have a company called Bring Back Eden, and my business partner Cameron James, he always says, think globally, act locally, and I love that. Like, what are global issues? How do you work on them here locally? So that's something that we lean on. And you brought up something great. Um, a big thing that I've been leaning on is the creation mandate. And in Genesis, it's for man to be fruitful, to multiply, subdue the earth, and to cultivate the land. So I've really been trying to take that to heart as a provider, as a husband, as a father, as an entrepreneur. How do I think abundantly and not scarcity, that there's not enough? Or, I'm watching what the world's saying. There's not enough anything. Yet if you just drive across the country, you can see we're clearly not overpopulated. You can see there's so much land, and that's just America. Like when we cram everybody in cities, yeah, scarcity feels like the norm. We don't know how to grow food. We don't know how to do any of these things because we're relying on these systems. But when these systems start to fall, or they start to purposely get broken down, now we're at the mercy of whatever, and we're acting in fear instead of knowing that God gave us this mandate to be able to be co-creators on this earth. And I think so many people, like what you said, you were talking about, the lessons that you can teach a child. I think it's the lessons you can just teach a man, anybody, like working on social or whatever I was doing. I'd put out a piece of content. If it didn't hit, I'm putting my value on the fact that that social content didn't hit. Like I had a social media consulting agency for a while. And if that content didn't hit, that was based off my value. And now I'm like, oh, geez, like that doesn't mean anything compared to when I go outside and I can physically see something physical from my efforts. There's the fruit of my labor literally there, and we can eat it, and it's nutritious, and it gives back because we can replant that seed. And for like a banana here, they're making all these pups. I can share them. I can start bringing the community together. And for me, it was a lot of me, a good portion of my life. And now I'm just surrendering, and I'm like, hey, God, where are you leading me? And he put me with Cam, who's amazing. He put me with such amazing people here in Florida. Yourself was one of those men. And I really think there's a call for men to rise up right now and to get back to the land, to know where their morals and values are, and to not be distracted by the ways of the world. Because we're in the world, we're not of the world. So how do we really focus on building community, not getting caught up? This is the day before the election when we're filming this. How do we not get caught up in the divide and realize it's not one or the other? Like, it's okay to say they're both not good or whatever the thing is. It's okay that, we don't have to be on a team, because the reality is that we're all made in the image of God. Why are we fighting? And we see that when we come together and when we work together, like the beauty that works, exactly what you just said, when 3 or 4 people start to come together, look at the progress we have, instead of just you and I on our own, one man on an island, and the world seems overwhelming. Like, no wonder we've been split individually all over. No wonder everybody has depression, anxiety, and feel like we can't get enough done and we don't have purpose, because purpose lies in being a servant leader. And that's what we're doing. So congrats to you from stepping away from jobs. For anybody out there who's afraid to step away because of the money, like God always provides. And you'll find a way, even like a network of men like this who have backgrounds in all over the place, but we're choosing to get back to the land. And maybe someday we can use those talents that we used to have. That doesn't mean you walk away from that forever, right? You take that skill and you can implement that in creating another source of income.
Yes, sir. I agree. And so many things that you mentioned that are key, but the one that really that I want to start with is, you mentioned going from a selfish mentality, me versus surrendering to the will of God, the will of where is he leading me? And that is such a key thing, because it's only then that we're going to then be able to make the right choices that will give us true freedom, true liberty, because otherwise we're really just following the desires of the flesh, right? But in reality, we want to cultivate the fruit of the Spirit. And in order to do that, we have to let the Most High do His will in our life, right? And it is easier said than done. But that's why I wanted to start replying to what you just mentioned with that, because it's so key. And before all the few notes that I wrote down, if you could please repeat the creation mandate that you said, because it just sounded awesome, and I wanna
Yeah. So the creation mandate is in Genesis. It's in I think it's in the first chapter of Genesis. It's God tells Adam when he's in the garden, he says, "Be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, and to cultivate the land." So
awesome.
for the
Yes.
homestead, literally the homestead that you're doing, you know what I mean? Like, make babies, have a family. Like, life and creation is amazing. We're not just a clump of cells, all this even this scarcity mindset now, right? Like, baby is a clump of cells until we determine what it is. Like we watch a seed turn into an oak tree. What is it? Just a random clump of cells. Next thing you know, you have a tree. Like, no, there's life in there, and there's this divine creation that is happening, whether we see it or not. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? So I think that that's such a huge thing is create families, be responsible, create these amazing communities, and not be the lone wolf. Like the lone wolf doesn't work. That's a Hollywood thing, or they put it in novels or whatever, but like that never works out well for anybody.
Definitely. And now that you say that, it just made me think. I might be wrong, but I think that maybe the lone wolf, it might be rooted on the spirit of fear. You don't want to connect with someone because you're afraid they're going to steal from you, they're going to harm you in one way or another.
Yeah.
And at some point, I've struggled with that,
Mm,
right? But thankfully, I'm no longer thinking that way, because the reality is that we need to trust others and be vulnerable. And hey, if at the end of the day someone has a bad intention and they act and they rob you or they do something bad, hey, at the end of the day, it's not, you're not gonna die. It's not the end of
mm,
the world, and God
mm,
will protect you. That's where
mm,
faith comes in.
mm.
So how much of the lone wolf mentality is rooted in fear? And if so, then you don't want to live in fear, right? We want to live in love. Um, Going back to what you mentioned about the grocery store, and it's so true that uh, and like if we stay in the perimeter of the store, is where the good food is, right? The produce section, the meat section, but all the aisles are just full of things coming in a package, and usually we want to stay away from that.
Yeah.
And of course, there are just a few companies that own everything, and following the money is so true that there where the control comes from.
Mm,
And then you see why it's so important to grow your own food, because going back to in hard times, if you don't know where your food comes from, then how are you going to feed your family? How are you going to feed yourself? And we don't even have to go to the end of the world type of deal. It doesn't have to be
yeah.
an extreme situation.
Yeah.
It could just be prices rise to a point where you can't afford your food anymore. But if we develop community, if we develop networks of people that grow different things, then we could trade, right? We could barter, which
Yeah.
is a custom that has been all throughout history. People have always done that. Even if they don't have the same beliefs or faith, they still traded with each other. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to agree in everything with everybody, right? That's where your nucleus comes in.
Mm,
But you still have to uh, have commerce and trade with others.
yeah.
And how are you going to do that if you don't have anything to provide?
Mm,
And a perfect example, yesterday, I had a bunch of Cuban oregano, and I don't know, that it grows so quickly, and it
I got a
just
ton of it right outside this window here.
it just spreads, out of nowhere, like by itself. You don't even have to water it or anything. So yesterday I was pruning a lot of it so that it didn't get too overwhelming, And I had a whole wheelbarrow of it, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna leave it there because if I put it in the ground, it's just gonna keep growing, and I'll see what I do with it, tomorrow. Then I don't have any chickens right now, which is actually a project that I'm trying to do very soon. But my neighbor, he has over 20, 30 chickens. And then I go over to his house and I'm like, hey man, can I buy some chickens from you, or can I get some? He's like, no, I'll give you all of them, And he just gave me a bunch of chickens for free. No, no, not chickens, sorry, eggs.
Nice. Okay.
And and then I was like, oh, have you ever fed your chickens Cuban oregano? And he's like, no, but I heard that it's very nutritious to the chickens. And I
Mm,
was like, oh, I have a whole wheelbarrow that I didn't
yeah.
know what to do with it. Why don't you take it? And then he took it, right, and now he's gonna plant those in his property. So he gave me some eggs, I
Yep.
gave him some Cuban oregano.
Yep.
So it's about providing value, and others would also reciprocate. And even if they don't, you still giving love to others, and
Still planting the seed.
exactly, exactly.
My neighbors are like that. We go back and forth all the time. They have awesome annuals, and we just go back and forth. Like I'll give them lemons or figs or what do we just have? Like Panama berries. If people haven't had Panama berries, I'll give them a bunch of that stuff. Watermelons, whatever I've going. Sweet potatoes. I'll give them that, and then they'll swap out for greens or whatever I need from their setup. So we just go back and forth. Like we don't even ask at this point. I just know if she's ever grabbing stuff, I'm gonna go over there and grab stuff. But you said something that was really awesome, and it was like the faith. And I find that within society, there's two things that have really been attacked. This idea of trust the science, and if you don't trust the science, you're going against, if you don't trust certain people, you're going against science, and now you're stupid, you're a Neanderthal. I think a big thing that I really saw, like during, and we got to curve even what we say now during 2020, so that way you can stay on whatever platform. But big thing is any faith was mocked, churches were shut down, all these things, like places where people go to find solace were shut down, and people were breaking down. And now you have this collective negative energy that's going everywhere. And I noticed that it was the people that had faith that were the most dangerous in a couple scenarios, because if I have faith in God, I'm not putting my faith in science or the government or whoever else, which it's not even their job to take care of us anyway. But somehow everybody allocated that responsibility instead of our own accountability to stay healthy or do whatever. We put that into the hands of the government. So anybody who had faith was dangerous, because now you're sovereign. Also notice that anybody who knows that we're all made in the image of God and that we're all equal are also dangerous, because now you can't push a lot of agendas like BLM. You can't push these things because these things are based off of that this person doesn't like you because you look like this. Says who? Like they're creating all this divide, whereas you're my brother just by sense that you are my brother, especially in Christ, right? Like you're my brother in Christ. So why are we, there shouldn't be any of this stuff, but you need all this divide and no solutions. I think that's a big thing, that we can all point out what's bad, but there's no solutions. And then the final thing that I really saw, and this has been coming out more, is when you look at like the climate change stuff, which is so vague. It could be anything, like even just the seasons is climate change. So you make something so vague and you just scare everybody, even if you follow the money, see who's causing climate change. But I think the big thing with that is that these studies are coming out that community farms, growing food in your own backyard, all these things are adding to carbon crisis or carbon emissions. You shouldn't grow your own food. You shouldn't do it. Wait, what? The most natural thing, first it's cows, then it's us growing food. So what? Like, here, you guys just do it. We're gonna give it all to you. You control everything, to the government. So when I see these things, I'm like, this is what I need to lean in on. I need to lean on faith. I need to lean on loving my neighbor as myself, and I need to lean on start growing food. And it's not out of fear; it's out of abundance and it's out of love. So that's what, for me as a man, and the people that I've been just meeting, we're all on that. We're all on that journey right now. Like, how do we put down the selfishness, the fear? How do we put down listening to whatever, giving up our ability to critically think and our free will? How do we get that back? And for me and for so many, it's getting back to the land. Because you said something earlier about like hearing what God's going to say to you and being open to that. And a lot of people like, how do I start? And I told my son when he was like 15, I was like, hey, we're going to church. And he kind of fought me on it. And I'm like, look, I know you didn't really go to church. I know a lot of these things, but the one thing I'm going to tell you, and that you will know from me, is that God is real. And you might not see it now because you're consumed in whatever you're looking at on your phone, which you should be looking at, on video games, on internet, on candy, on all this crap. But you're going to realize one day, whether it's when you fall in love with a woman, when it's you have an experience and you have your first child, whether you're in nature and something happens, you're going to know that God is real. So for so many people, like, how do I talk to God, or is God even listening, or I don't even know where to start? Just go outside, just go barefoot and put a seed in the ground and watch that thing grow. And look what's going on behind the scenes that we don't even realize. Like, look behind you, look at all the abundance in that photo. Cranberry hibiscus right there. I just harvested a bunch of that. But look at what's happening, and we're not even thinking about it. It's just naturally happening because that's the way of the world. So, so many people are like, they don't want to hear talks about God, or they don't want to hear this. This is our companies, Bring Back Eden. It's not just bring back this illusion of the Garden of Eden. It's bring back that mandate. That family is key. That community is key. That we should be responsible stewards of the earth and love cultivating the land. Like, these things are all amazing things that we should be doing, and we're getting pulled away from that. Society now is literally saying, don't do any of these things. And we wonder why suicide's up, depression's up, divorce rates up, abortion is just like, oh, it's what, we're not even thinking about it. We're like, no, and you want to talk about a controversial, topic, like just the killing of life. We're taking down forests, we're destroying our land, we're mining all over, whether it's oil or lithium strip mines, whatever they are, or it's abortion. It's destruction, 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 pitting all of us against each other. Destruction. There's no abundance there. Where's the abundance in the world if we rely on the system? The parasite class, as people like to say, right? Sorry, again.
No, hey, feel free to always elaborate, because all your answers are, something that I want to respond to. And before starting this podcast, I would wonder, how do podcasts go for 3-4 hours? I would never understand that. But now it's like, it makes so much sense, because you ask one question, but then that question leads to multiple topics, right? So like, we could take any of your responses and do a podcast just on
Yeah,
any of those.
sure.
So
We're just planting the
it's
seeds. We're planting the seeds right now for people.
exactly, because any of the things that you've mentioned are all very important. Um, but one of the ones that I wanted to talk about right now, that you mentioned, faith. And you said, people, especially in 2020, and with all the mandates, and there was a lot of uh, people that believe, people that didn't believe, or I guess contradicting opinions or ways of thinking, right? But
Mhm.
then you said, oh, people trust the science, and then if you don't trust the science, quote unquote, then you're unlearned, or you don't know what you're talking about, right? And I completely agree with you in that we need to lean on faith. And you are, of course, saying it on the biblical side, right? In God, because of course we share that. But what I would even add is that even trusting in science is faith of itself, because they are getting that information from a book, right?
Mm,
Most of the knowledge, theories that we know from science, the people, they don't know that scientists personally. They never talk to them face to face. They
mm,
got that information either from a video online, or from a book in school, or from a study that they read online.
yep,
And then they are putting their faith on that person that wrote that study or that book. So
yep,
how is it different from our faith in the book of the Bible? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just we choose to put our faith on the one that has all the power, the one
yep,
that knows, that has all knowing, right? Now the beautiful thing is that even science is of God, right? He created science. I have nothing against science or mathematics. I
sure.
It has many applications
I agree.
in life, that we could build, we could grow food, right? Like, for example, electroculture. I haven't gotten into it, but I'm sure there is something in it. I'm sure there is some sort of benefit in growing food with electroculture, or
Mhm.
the the soil, right? The soil is chemistry involved in soil. So somebody that is a biochemist
Yep.
could probably grow food a lot better than someone that doesn't. So
And the soil
I
is the
have
most
nothing
important
against
thing to
science.
start in your system. No, I agree.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
I think it's but when man tries to play God, when it's, and you brought up something awesome, and maybe you could throw this clip in here, but and this is awesome. Like I used to always say I'm from Philadelphia. Now I'm like, no, I'm actually from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But one of my favorite shows used to be Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And it's funny because Glenn Howerton, who plays Dennis on there, his son is one of my son's best friends, which is one of the perks of living in Los Angeles. You just meet so many people. But I don't know if you ever saw that show, but there's this scene, and I'll send it to you. But it's literally Mac, one of the guy, he believes in God on the show. He's like the only one. But he's given like this presentation, and he's talking about having faith in God. And Dennis and the other characters are sitting here. So it's kind of like he's a lawyer, and he's talking to he's talking to the jury. And they're like, oh, believing in God's stupid. It's just some superstitious thing, some book a bunch of people put together. And Mac breaks down, oh, you mean like, have you met this scientist? Have you done this? Have you done the research on your own? And then they're like, well, no. And he's like, so what's the difference? And they're just like, they can't respond to anything, right? It's so awesome. It's so good. But it's so witty. And the fact that you're 100% correct, that most people that are telling us things, like I've even done things that, at University of Florida, they have their extensions, and they're talking about growing food or whatever their thing is. And I'll say something, they're like, oh. And then I realized they never even actually did it. Like business professors, they're not actually running huge businesses because they wouldn't be doing this. We think these people are perfect, not saying they don't know, based off of what they're taught, like you said, based off of the book, like a doctor, based off of what I was told, they might be the best. But that doesn't mean what you were told is correct. That's not necessarily on them, but it's also on them to be able to split that. And getting into growing food is a fantastic point you brought up, by the way. Very, very nice. Full circle there. We had a client for a food forest that we installed. So we install food forests all over Florida. And one of them that we did was north of Daytona, this place called Ormond Beach. Really awesome. This client we had there, it's a husband and wife. The husband is like a traditional MD, and the wife, she works at University of Florida, but she's also she does holistic medicine, homeopathic. I think she's a homeopathic doctor. And it's interesting because they were telling us that up until like 2020, they kind of didn't really talk things, right? Because traditional and, the new Western medicine and traditional kind of go head and head, per the Rockefellers in 1930s, and you can look into that. But her husband said it was very interesting that when everything went down in 2020, 2021, 2022, he was watching doctors say they were getting shots and they weren't. He was watching doctors get exemptions from stuff. He was reading papers that they blatantly knew were not right, did not go through, when you write a medical journal or a scientific paper, it has to go through scrutiny, it has to go through all these things. They were just getting published left and right. And it's interesting because a lot of those are getting pulled now. You can't even find them anymore. Like I try to bring up an old paper and doesn't exist anymore, but yet it backed the science. So he said he had a huge awakening of what was really happening. And now his wife, they put in a food forest, and this is all validating things that she's been saying. So she's been healing veterans with PTSD and depression, all these things, using natural foods, not pesticides, not fertilizers, growing food and showing how to do this. And she's trying to leverage that into the University of Florida of like what she's doing. Now, obviously, the University of Florida has their money and their donors. They do a lot of great things, but again, you can follow the money on some things. But that watching that awareness of her husband being able to drop that ego and to start looking into what his wife is doing. And now they're both so into it. If you go on our YouTube, Bring Back Eden, or even on our social media, Bring Back Eden, Cam just did a video where he went back and took a look at the system that we built. We built a swale system because they had water that would flood down. We built out a rain garden. But we did this mix of like syntropic agroforestry with like a traditional food forest. And it was awesome because even as a doctor, she didn't go around acting like she knew what everything was. She studies food, she understands it, but like she's asking questions, and nobody there had ego. And I think that's such a great thing that I love about what we do is people don't have egos. And even growing food, like I just went back for a site visit the other day for an urban food forest that we did in Tampa. And the homeowner's like, hey, what is this? And I looked and I'm like, I don't actually know what we planted there. Let me get back to you. I'm not going to do like, plant snap or something. Let me actually get back to you. I'm going to go to the design and see what that is. Or she had like it looked like a fungus on this perennial spinach we had. And I wasn't quite sure. And I wanted to give an answer like standard. I don't know if it's a man or just me. Like I want to have the solution, right? Like, oh, I know what the solution is. I'm going to tell you what it is. But I had to step back and be like, actually, I don't know. Let me make some calls. And I made some calls, and then people were like, actually, it's this. So I think that's such a good thing. If when we talked about community, to have a community of people you can lean on for their expertise. Like I can't know every plant. I can't know how everything works. I can't know how to build these soils perfectly. Like that's where science is awesome, because you do peer review stuff, and what worked for you might work for me, it might not. But then we can see what regions are working where. And I think that's why having this community is so awesome. And food's universal, right? Like who's fighting over food? Food goes past the politics and all this other stuff. Like, yeah, we have the vegans and we have just the meat eaters, and raw milk's good, raw milk's bad. My family drinks raw milk all the time, by the way. But I think we've looked at everything we can, and society is fighting over everything, even things that are just natural, right? Like that's why we do a food forest. People are like, oh, what food should we grow? I'm like, let's look at what a forest looks like. Let's go out into the woods. Let's see, like behind you, perfect example. You have all these different varieties of trees and ground covers and shrubs. All these things just grow together. Instead of doing this monocropping system, how do we see something that's abundant? Like a monocropping system, and I'm thinking about this right now, is like a society where people are like all the same, all singular minded, all believe the same thing. They're stuck. They're stuck in their ways. This is what's happening. And the soil's eroding underneath, and it's not building because there's not diversity there. So, and I'm not talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, but like the diversity of plants. So it's not building that soil. However, when you have a food forest, now look at a society where we have all these different types of people. There's one singular goal. It's not a free-for-all. Singular goal is to grow food and to create this ecosystem. But at the same time, it's different flares for everything. There's different layers. There's different types of fruits and vegetables. Different things are pulling things from the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil. When one thing dies, another thing comes up and flourishes. So that's what we're building out with Food Forest, and that's what we're trying to show people of growing food, that there are these unique ways that, it's going to look a little messy sometimes. Sometimes it looks beautiful, but that's what the forest looks like. Now, we talk all the time about cutting down forests, but yet we don't want to build one out in our own home because we want to keep our lawns perfect and, everything manicured. Well, we either want the forest or we don't. Which one is it?
Definitely. I agree with many things that you mentioned, and I think that being able to humble oneself and really test what we currently believe in any topic, right? It could be
Mhm.
when it comes to health, how you mentioned the MD, he had his way of thinking because of his education, right? The being a doctor, and he wouldn't really communicate too much with his wife, which was in the more holistic and growing food forest. And then when he started in observation, seeing what things that were going on, then he started asking questions. And
Yeah.
that is such a key thing, because nowadays we, because I fall into that too, that we don't ask enough questions. We get entertained with social media, and that's why we need to really try to fast as much as possible from information that is not really building us, because then our mind just is looking for that dopamine hit instead of actually something that helps us. So we need to be able to question the current belief, whatever it is, the topic. So of course, when it comes to growing food, you mentioned monocrops. Now there is a place for them, right? In a homestead, you could grow row gardens because there is a benefit for it. But don't just do that.
Yeah.
Also have a food forest. you know,
Yeah.
there's no reason why you should just
You're
do
correct. Thanks for
monocrops.
thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, you are correct.
It's a matter of what options do we have, because maybe a storm comes and our food forest, it knocks some of our trees down, but maybe the greenhouse that we have is completely still good, and at least for that season or the next few months you still have some food production in your greenhouse,
Yep,
or the chickens that you have, or whatever it is having diversity, how you said.
exactly.
And going back to the food forest, and I think it's a concept that it is really growing out there, right? People are really starting to get into it because, hey, we are mimicking how nature grows. And it grows in layers, and it's like you got the canopy, the understory, the shrub layer, root layer, ground cover, vine layer, right? All of those things grow together. And it's sort of like how humans grow, right? Like we're all different in many different ways. We all provide a benefit, but we're not
Mhm.
completely equal. We're not completely the same. We got our different characteristics, different benefits. My flaws, you help them, and vice versa. So,
Mhm.
and it can be something messy, how you said, but it's also beautiful. It's really how
Yes.
you look at it. I
Yeah.
like it, and I think it's beautiful regardless.
About organized chaos.
And now I wanted to go into something that we discussed early before the call, and is how we could cultivate internally, right? You mentioned that. Um, so how could learning to grow our own food and a food forest help us cultivate internally as well?
For me, it's really taught me patience. I think in a world where we want everything right away, it taught me patience of sometimes things are going to work, sometimes they're not. Like I struggled a lot because I have a ton of bananas and I'm watching people's videos online where they're getting all this production and their bananas and their plantains are going. And I'm looking, I'm like, I'm at 18 months. Why am I not getting anything? And then one, the patience, but two, like, so why am I not getting anything? Am I feeding the soil? Am I watering this enough? Like, did I just set it and forget it? Or am I actually paying attention and doing the small things every day that are going to build production long term? And I think that's even for us having routines. Like, I want to make $1 million this year. And then people just sit and just think about, well, do you have the discipline to do that? Do you have the time to do that? Do you have the ideas to do that? Like, do you have the resources to do that? Like, what are the things that we can start putting in place? And then how do we start following, um, whether it's a routine or just being consciously aware of the decisions that we make? Are they taking us towards that goal or are they pulling us here? Like, my best friend, he told me one time, I always say my curse is that I always have too many options and I don't know which one to pick. Like, I got this, and there's all these shiny objects. And my best friend said it. He was like, "Look on the other side of this coffee." We used to go to La Colombe all the time. It's an amazing coffee company based in Philadelphia, and we used to always meet there whenever I was back in Philadelphia from Los Angeles. And we met up there early one morning, and he's like, "You know what, man?" He's like, "Look on the other side of the coffee shop here. It's this huge like warehouse. You see that thing on the shelf?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "That's your goal. That right there. But to get to there, you have to go around these tables. You have to go around these pizza or these people. You have to go by the distraction of there's the pastry section, and well, they're cooking food over here, and well, there's the coffee, and here's the counter, and here's all these things." He's like, "But that's your goal." And he's like, there's all these options, and you want to stop and take a look at each one. But how do you push past all that and just focus on that goal? Whether he realized it or not, Pete, that's always stuck with me, and that's been my North Star of just finding that focus. Like my focus is grow food. Okay, so what does that look like? And how do I adapt to that? And I think the second thing that it's really helped me to do is just to take action. Just put those seeds in the ground. doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly how, when we compare ourselves with other people's systems and what they're doing. Just this is our own, like for me, this is my journey. And I get to share it with other people and be inspired and inspire others. But you're never going to learn anything. You're never going to do anything, whether it's relationships or faith or a career, whatever it is. You're never going to do it unless you plant that first seed. So for me, like metaphorically and physically speaking, it's planting that first seed. And that's, I can say that all day. Now I still struggle with that at times, right? There's still things I'm like, oh, I got to do this, and I start to procrastinate. And then that's internal things that I need to look at and work on. However, I think it's planting that seed, and it's being focused and patience. Those are the three things that I've really learned. And I guess the final thing, if you're going to do four, is that like we're not in control. I feel like for men, we try to control everything. I've run men's groups for many years and really working with men. And I noticed that when I first did it, I thought like, oh man, these guys have all these problems and I'm good. And they had all this childhood trauma or whatever. But I noticed that like the one thing I always related to men with is that we're trying to control things. And if it doesn't grow the way I want it to, or the system doesn't look the way, or if I don't get the production, now I start to panic and I'm doing everything I can instead of relaxing and just letting it happen. It's like I'm struggling in the ocean, and the more I struggle, the more I sink. So sometimes it's just sitting, it's just being still, like it says in Psalms, just be still and know that I am God, and just observe the system. Like whether it's observing your life, your relationships, whatever it is, just sit and just be still and just observe what's nature telling me. Is something not working? Maybe it shouldn't be there. Something keep blowing over. Well, is there wind coming through? Should I put a windbreak up? Maybe a native plant like a sapodilla or something? Should I put that up to block the wind? Or should I just remove that plant from that area? Maybe it doesn't want to be there. And I find that nature is always going to tell you what it wants and what it doesn't. It's just up to us to notice that. So those are my
That is
four.
awesome, man. That is awesome. And how you mentioned, we can't control everything is so true, but we could still start where we are.
Mm,
It's sort of a quote from Alex Hormozy that I really like, is that we are and I'm sort of paraphrasing, I can't remember it too much right now, but it's sort of like we are always waiting for the right conditions to start, when in reality now are just starting is the right conditions. I think that's
mm,
how it goes.
yeah.
And how you said, planting the seed, patience and focus is so true, is so important. And having too many options is something that I have struggled with in the past too, and even to this day, trying to just focus on one or two things every day, right? Other than obviously what you have to do maintenance on, which
Yeah.
we all have maintenance on everyday life, in the garden, with family. But besides the things that we have to do every day, just picking one or two things to get done
Mm.
instead of writing a whole to-do list of things I want to get done.
Look,
And
I got like 13 things there to do. Why do I do this to myself? I can get 12 done. If I don't get that one, I'm down on myself.
exactly.
Why?
So it's sometimes we by writing it down is important, right? Because then you have a clear goals and tasks that you need to do. But I mean, I guess to me it also happens that sometimes I just write things down and that makes me feel
Mm.
accomplished, but that doesn't really do anything. Writing it down, if you don't get them done, it's still a waste of time. So that's why right now I'm trying to just focus on one or two things. What is the number one thing I need to get done today?
Yeah.
Maybe two things. If you did get that one thing done, okay, what is the next thing? And
Yeah.
everything else would just be a bonus.
I think that's the thing. If people confuse productivity with being just busy. Like if I put 10 things down here, I'm like, oh man, like look how productive, look at all the stuff I'm doing. But like I'm not going to get to them because it's just overwhelming. Create like one thing every day. Just it's like the concept of 1% better, right? One thing every day. I struggle with this all the time. So just because I'm saying it doesn't mean I'm actually able to do this every day, but it's something I'm at least aware of and I'm working on. So I'm glad that that resonates with you as well.
Well, it goes back to what you said just now, that we have to self-analyze. We have to, do introspection and see, hey, if I'm not producing a yield, and
Mm,
of course that applies directly to food forests and growing food, but it also applies to anything in life. If I am not producing the results in my business or in my uh, interpersonal relationships or at the gym, whatever it is your goal, it is easy to make excuses or blame on an external variable or blame somebody else.
yeah.
But if we really take responsibility and see why I'm not producing the result that I want to produce or what I set out to produce, is something that I'm not doing
Mm,
properly, or maybe the way that I'm doing it. We don't know. It could be anything. But
mm,
if we are not willing to, again, humble ourselves
mm,
and understand and just be honest that, hey,
mm.
I am the one at fault here. But if I am able to do that, then that means I have the control to then make changes. Because if I blame my
Victim
family
mentality.
members, exactly, victim mentality. If I blame my family members or society or my job or the weather or anything, then I have no control. I can't do anything about it. So I think looking within is a huge thing. But again, it takes humility to accept that you were the one that was wrong or that you're the one that is lacking something. So yeah, I really like that. And that you have to go through, how you say you have that goal in the coffee place, you want to get to that place, to that goal. But then in the way there, you get so many different options and new things come up every day, and they all look great. They all look like they would be a
Mm,
success. But if you every second switch your focus, then you're never going to get to that original goal that you had. And if you keep changing your goal, same thing is going to happen the next day. Or you
good
switch
point.
your goal, but then another idea comes in, and then another one, and then you never actually achieve anything in life. And I think that's a big issue that I've had.
Mm.
And
What do
one
you
thing
think
that
that
then is
that
so
is? You think that that's what do you think is leading to that? That you and I feel this. I'm assuming a lot of men feel this, whatever their age. Why do you think we're going through this right now?
well, maybe your focus and purpose might not be completely solidified. It could also just be the habits that we have grown up in, not finishing what we started. So not having that habit of, hey, I started this and I'm gonna finish it no matter what happens,
Mm,
and then I'll move on to something else. Which, for example, I when I have children, I'm not gonna push them to go to school at all, to go to university. To me, I think it's not. I mean, there are some careers that is necessary, but in general, I think there's so many other alternatives out there that are much better, both in time
great.
and return on investment, right? But I would say, I mean, I did learn a lot in my university career that, as you mentioned earlier in the call, I will be able to apply it at some point to growing food and building food forests and homesteads, right? Because the engineering mindset is one of solving problems. And of course, in
Mm,
for example, permaculture, the problem is the solution. So I know
mm,
that at some point I'm going to be able to integrate those skills that I learned, right? But besides that, I would say that the biggest thing, character building wise, that I learned is 3 years into it, I was already questioning the industry, the medical device industry, big time.
Mhm.
And I sort of regretted it, my degree. I was like, I'm not sure if I picked the right one, you know. But since I was already 3 years into it, what I told myself was, you know what, I started it. So just for the fact that I started, I'm going to finish what I started.
Mhm.
And I did. I
And
graduated.
imagine walked away and you were 3/4 of the way done. Like imagine how that would play on your life the rest of the way.
Exactly. Even though I had some second thoughts on the choice of degree, or maybe even just going to university as a whole,
Hmm.
I said it is so much more important to at least finish what I started.
Yeah,
Because if I hadn't, then the rest of my life I could translate that into other aspects of life. I start
love that.
something and then don't finish it. So
Yeah,
I think that's a key thing. When you start something, as long as you're doing something righteous, right? Because if you started doing something wicked, the moment you realize it's wicked, you could stop there at that moment, right?
yeah,
But if it's something righteous, it's okay to finish it. Even if later you change your whole career path, it's
yeah,
okay
yeah.
because you'll be able to learn some lesson in that and apply it.
Agree.
So
I think that's a great thing to not be afraid to pivot. I think, if you just look at metaphorically like a food forest, I planted a tree. I don't want to have to remove that tree. Or a lot of these trees are sacrificial trees. Like we put moringa, we chop back moringa or these leguminous trees that create canopy. We want to chop them back. That's what we're supposed to do. But it's so hard to prune or to chop back. You're like, oh, but when you prune, you get rid of the dead branches, and now my mangoes can really go. It can fill out. It can really take its full potential productivity. With the moringa, I chop that moringa down. It's called, the miracle tree. I chop that down, I could harvest those leaves. And now instead of one big shoot, now 30 shoots pop up. Now you have all this more productivity. It's releasing nitrogen into the soil. You could put that wood down. It starts to break down. It feeds the whole system. A lot of things, particularly in college, or just college as an example, is like, I did this, I need to stick to it. Like for me, I felt like such a failure when I went for news. And then I didn't realize once I was in the news industry, I didn't like it or agree with it. And then I'm like, now what? I felt too good to do anything else because I just spent all this time. I got this degree in this thing. And I was afraid to pivot for a long time. But in the pivot, you find that freedom. And it doesn't mean you still don't stick to your same North Star, right? Sometimes it's just, well, I got to go around this or go here. So it's the same with like a food system. Don't be afraid to take things out, or everything has a season, right? Like people in our lives. I had one of my good buddies, Lucas Crump. He is one of the co-founders of a men's group, men's company to help men's wellness called Everyman. And I'll throw this out because this is kind of how this is. I was in a tough place and I had to make a tough decision on something. And he told me there's so much freedom in letting go, because not saying you have to forget or that was a mistake or whatever it was, but it was a chapter of your life. If you're reading the book of your life, that was chapter 12, and you have to finish that chapter to get to the next one. And lo and behold, the day that he told me that, I was working at this hotel, like in the lobby. I started talking to this girl. She needed consulting for something, followed her on Facebook and then or Instagram. And then 2 years later, I saw a photo of her and this girl during like early 2020. And I'm like, well, who's this? And that ended up being my wife. So like the same day that he told me that, 2 years later, just being in that surrounding, I ended up meeting someone who ended up leading me to my wife. And that was a close of one chapter in the beginning of hopefully the rest of my life. So don't be afraid. If I could say one thing, it's just don't be afraid to like let go. And people say let go and let God, but like let go and have faith. And I think we're afraid to let go because we feel like we have control in that situation. Even sometimes it's a dumpster fire and it's falling apart, but we're like, oh, but this was the plan. I'm afraid I can't get off the plan. Like life isn't about a plan. You know what I mean? Like the Bible doesn't say do this career wise, all these things and everything will be good. It's like, no, put your faith and trust, love God with your heart, your mind, and your soul. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Everything else will fall into place. And sometimes that's too easy, right? Sometimes it's like the simplest thing is the solutions. That's not what the world's telling me to do.
I mean, it is easy, but it takes you not wanting to do what you want to do. So that is the hard part, right? Because I mean, Jesus said that
Or you
his
might
yoke is
like
easy.
think that you don't want to do it right now.
Exactly. So it's really renewing your mind. What thoughts
Mm,
are you having that might not be the right ones? But this that you just mentioned is so awesome because it's true. It is hard to let go, but as you said, there's so much freedom in letting go, and it
mm,
is just a chapter of your life.
mm.
And then it made me think of when someone is reading then your entire book, is that going to help that person,
Yeah,
build others? But more importantly, did your life bring glory to God? And if sometimes we have to let go of things that we want
yeah,
and we don't know how it's going to be for his glory and also how it's going to benefit us in the long run.
yeah.
And how you said we have to have the faith. And then sort of segues into my next question. I mean, not really, but I think I don't want to miss this question because it's something that we talked about earlier. I mean, before the call, and it is the whole concept of death in the system, right? The system
Yeah.
of agriculture and food forest. So, can you tell us a little bit about how that is the whole concept of death in a food forest system?
This is such a great question. And I wanna preface it by saying last week we had to put our dog down. She was almost 15. Pit boxer mix, already lived like 4 years over her lifespan, and it was so hard to put her down. And we had someone come here and put her down in our home, and we had the boys there, and it was such a great lesson. Like it was so brutal experience, but it was so awesome for the boys to be able to be there and to see those final moments and to see the love that they had. They had something worth loving and missing, and it was amazing because my wife's like understandably so, the family's been struggling, and we have a golden retriever like puppy, and he's just like feels like he's lost. And a dog, it serves a great purpose when you have a great dog, right? Especially when it goes through on a journey. And somebody, I forget who my wife said, but somebody sent her a message and was like, she had she died because she was making room for the new addition to your family. Like she knew that her time was here, right? And now she's making room. And it's amazing that she said it because I really think about the impact of like that dog had on me as far as patience of like I married my wife and she had this dog, and whether we moved this new home and she's peeing inside, and like do I explode, do I freak out, or do I have patience, or she's getting older, do I have love or whatever. And that might seem weird to some people, like how do you compare a dog to whatever, but I really feel like it helped me get patience, especially as this dog got older, for waking up in the middle of the night for my son that's going to come, and getting used to cleaning up these messes and stuff, right? Like things I didn't think about then, I like see the lesson. So I see a lot of the characteristics in our other puppy because of this dog. I see that my boys are able to love, and they're able to have responsibility because of this dog. And this dog fed the system of our home, right? She might be gone, but she's not. Her spirit's still here. Same thing with like a food forest. If we're going to look at like a specific type of system of a food forest, so some of you might have heard of syntropic agroforestry. It's this basically, it's a bunch of rows, and there's a ton of diversity of plants in these rows. Now, some of these plants are going to go super quick. They're going to create a canopy. Some of these plants are going to take longer. Some of these plants are sacrificial plants. Some of these plants are grass that you chop and you put it back into the system. But the whole time, that every time this plant flourishes and creates shade, so that this long-term plant, like a mango, so just say we have a moringa that gets real big, it's creating shade for this mango. Its life is producing for this life. But at some point, we're going to take this tree out, as this new canopy starts to emerge. And that's going to break down into the system, and it's going to build that soil. It's going to release everything that the other tree needs to be able to flourish. And that's maybe our long-term species. But we plant this system that everything in it is dying constantly, whether it's the things have to die to revitalize the soil, right? The soil's dead when nothing's dying into it. It's like when there's nothing there dying, the soil dies. So it's this beautiful circle of life that everything is just interconnected there. And Mike Garcia, he runs Ever Oak Farm out of Orlando. An amazing guy. He has a great story too. He'd be a great guest on this podcast. But we did like a syntropic kind of like project with, not really a project, but he was like going through what his particular system is. And he's very adamant on death is the life of the system. So is my friend Molly I was telling you about. She owns that used to own Sage, and now her farm is so hard, and she's all about this too, this regeneration. Like, how do we take, people talk about sustainability. Sustainability is just sustaining whatever's there. So if whatever's there is dead, you're not really regenerating it, you're just keeping it basic. We don't want to do that. We want to regenerate. And so much of that is whether it's composting, taking your food scraps, putting that back into the system to revitalize what the soil is. The amazing thing is that when things die, it creates life consistently. Like, I have to die and leave, so that way my family tree can continue and more people can flourish, and as the generations go. So I think that's such a beautiful thing that we see in the system of like a banana. So I have this banana right here, and it has a banana rack. Once that banana rack is ready for me to harvest, I'm gonna take down that entire banana tree, or it's not a tree, it's a stem, but I'm gonna take down that entire banana tree. Now, for some people are like, why? It looks beautiful, it's big, but when I take that out and I chop it up, that creates biomass for the rest of my system. Inside of the trunk, there's so much water. I hacked that up in the forest, and I taught my son Maverick this. You put that around another tree, and that's going to be this natural water system where, as the plant needs water, it's sucking it from that old trunk from that tree. And what's going to happen is new pups are going to emerge, and that's going to create a whole new system. So we need death for life. And I don't know, I'm assuming other cultures are different, but in America, we don't want to talk about death. We're afraid to talk about death. We're afraid to let go. And I think a huge part of that is this idea that, there was a big bang, and we come from nowhere, and there's no real purpose, and we're just here, and YOLO, and there's not this greater sense that this is just temporary, and this is a beautiful place for us to experience this thing that we call life, and something great is happening after this. So I think this idea of things dying, people are so afraid to look at death. And I think a great way, especially for people to really see death in a system and how it works, is to get outside. David the Good is awesome. Are you familiar with David the Good?
Yes,
His books are
definitely.
awesome.
A lot of good information, definitely.
He's a great inspiration. He talks about a lot of this idea of, he was talking about that he had a cat that his family loved. And when the cat died, they dug a hole, they buried it in the backyard under this tree. And now it fed, when that thing breaks down into the soil, and feeds the bugs, and it feeds the soil and the micronutrients that are in there. Now it's feeding this tree. And he's like, and every time I eat a piece of this fruit, it's like I'm eating, cuddles or whatever. Like, he throws humor in there, but that's what it is. It all goes back into the system. So that's, I think, a beautiful way to see, like, if you don't have things dying in your system, you don't have life. Your system isn't flourishing.
Definitely, it's part of it. And how you said the whole thing about putting down a dog is pretty crazy, because recently I've had a couple of different instances, and for the sake of time, I won't go into it, but how people get so attached to having a dog. So we could be someone that maybe hasn't had that experience, could be insensitive to it and say, hey, why are you overreacting, right? But in reality, we have to, if we are to love ourselves if we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, then we should question, hey, why is that hurting that person that much? And there is something there, because
Yeah.
dogs are a good companion and very loyal. So we could learn a
Unconditional
lot.
love.
We could learn a lot from their relationship to humans,
Sure.
And
Well, can I throw something in
I,
there real quick?
of course,
There's this awesome joke that you can lock your wife and your dog in the garage for 3 days. You come home and your wife wants to stab you, your dog wants to lick you. You know what I
that's
mean?
funny.
It's like,
It's so true. It's so true. They'll be excited to see you, even though you locked them in there for a bunch of days.
yeah,
But it's like in every situation in life, you can either complain about it and be a victim, or you could learn the lesson in that situation and then find the opportunity in it. And when it comes to a food forest and growing food, as you mentioned, there's plants that are there to feed the other plants, to decompose as you throw them in the ground, and then they become part of the soil. So that's where knowledge comes in, right? And that's where it's important to connect with people that have done it in the past, that know how to build uh, productive food systems, because someone might not know that that is how it should be, and then
mhm,
when a plant dies, they could say, hey, it was my fault, what am I doing wrong,
yeah,
when in reality it's just a part of the whole process. So
yeah.
I think knowledge is so important, so that which plants can be used as feeding the soil. And that we could definitely learn a lot from the whole concept of death is the life of the system.
I mean, a
And
plant has to die to fuel us, right? Like, it's not coming in our body, but it's
exactly,
within our body, you know. Believe it or not, if you swallow
exactly,
a watermelon seed, it will not grow in your stomach. So like
which is
that's
so funny,
my
because
grandma used to say.
the whole vegetarian system, the whole vegetarian mindset, and I, for some time, I was vegetarian for like a good year and a half, 2 years.
Hmm,
But it's like, even if you're a vegetarian, the plant dies, so aren't they alive? So
yeah.
why not eat meat too? But anyway, that's a different topic. Now I know that
You
we're
just
short
you
in
just
time.
lost some followers.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
I was
But
kidding.
I know you gotta go, but I do have one last question, and is really around building a food production system.
Mhm.
Of course, at first you're probably gonna have to water it a lot and maybe have some irrigation lines in there, so that they start growing and they become very strong. But can you give us some tips or advice on how to build a system that at some point maybe you don't have to have irrigation in it? Is
Yeah,
that even a thing?
there is. That's an awesome question. And I just got our company just got certified for Florida friendly landscapes last week. It's this initiative through the University of Florida. It's basically how do we take, these lawns, these perfectly manicured spaces that we have and we see all over Florida, and it has to be pruned right. It has to be fertilized. It has to have herbicides on it. It has to be all this stuff that just takes so much time and money. And how do we incorporate natives? How do we incorporate drought tolerant stuff? How do we incorporate maybe wind resistant type plants? How do we create a system that needs that it just knows how to work together? When all these things are together in this system, that they're just all helping each other. This one's pulling water, this one's pulling nitrogen, all this. So I think a big thing, if you have nothing going on and you're starting from scratch, the number one thing you need to do is build your soil. So whether that's, and sometimes if you want to fast track it, that's bringing in local good compost. You can compost, but it's going to take so long. If you actually want to build, just say like a 30 by 40 plot. So you have a 30 by 40 plot, you want to build a little food forest. What I would do is you mentioned the layers of a food forest. And anybody can look that up, but there's 7 layers of a food forest. Pick a few plants from each one of those layers, because they'll all start to work together in the system. If you want to create a good system that doesn't use water, you have to have diversity. It's a great mix between knowing what fruit trees and what plants want to be in your region. So you have to know what USDA zone that you're in. Florida, we're either 9A, 9B, 10A, 10B. That's basically where our zones are, which means we can pretty much grow anything, which is amazing. But know what plants should be there locally. Ask around. The things that you really want to build is you want to build that soil. You want to know the right plants that are supposed to be there, and a good diversity of natives and, you know, whatever fruit bearing plants that you want. There's a lot of good native fruit bearing plants. We mulch heavy. And when you mulch heavy, mulch, when it breaks down, it not only feeds the soil, and I don't mean like mulch from Home Depot. I mean, call up your local tree service guys and they'll drop that off. Ask them where it is. Ask them like what kind of mulch it is, like pine, oak, any of these types of things. Figure out what that is, and they'll usually drop it off for free. Like, I'm going to show you this right here. Like, if you look out my window, I don't know if you can see here, but I got a huge thing of mulch right there. I have like some tropic rose going there. We have a bunch of bananas right there. But get a lot of mulch, and you can start really simple. You can plant 4 fruit trees, and then around that, put a couple perennial spinaches. You can put a vine, so yams or sweet potatoes, or you could do passion fruit. Put that there. You can put, sweet potatoes are great tubular, so that goes under the ground, and that creates like that will create a ground cover on top of wherever your mulch is. And find things that grow really quickly. Like, I just put these rows in here, and I want fast food production. So I have a mango and avocado, which are going to take a couple years. So I have a row, it's like 15 feet. I have a mango, avocado, mango, avocado. I put them kind of close. In between that, I have cassava. So you can get a cassava is it's an amazing root. So it's delicious. But when you cut the stems, like a lot of these plants, you just cut the stems, you just stick them in the ground, and they'll just regrow into a new plant. So I have cassava. I have everything evenly, like alternating. So I have cassava in there, and then I'll do an eggplant, I'll do an okra, I'll do a sweet potato, and then a sugar cane. And I'll just keep repeating this pattern. Now, all these are going to grow. Like, the sweet potato is going to grow fast, and then they get food out of that. Cassava, within a year, I'll have food out of that. Oh, and have papayas. Papaya, I'll get food in like 6 months. Papayas are, in my opinion, the best. Papaya and banana, the best fast growing foods for your systems. And they're great chop and drop, which means you basically drop whatever you don't need. If the plant's dying or you're pruning, you chop it, you drop it, you put it back into the system, and it feeds the system. So those are the plants that I have in these 2 rows, and that's going to grow really quickly. And the thing is if I need to move them, besides the avocado and mango, I can take out the rest of the stuff in that system. It's super easy to take them out. I can swap and put new things in next year. But those are the things that produce hard for around me. And then around them, I have like my gingers and my turmerics. So gingers and turmerics grow really great too. But the point is that I don't need to water. Like, initially, like, I'll go out and water. But when you soak that mound, because I put it up on a mound, I put everything up. When I soak that, and then we put that mulch on, that mulch, 1, suppresses the weeds, 2, it's building the soil, and 3, and most importantly for me, it's maintaining that moisture in there. So I don't have to water every day. It's just maintaining that moisture. So that's where I am now. We have an irrigation system here. So if you have an irrigation system, awesome. If you have a hose, that works. Just make sure you put like a filter on the edge of like where it combines into your home, into your hose. You can get like an RV filter or something, so you're not putting all the stuff in. You're on public water. But that's a super fast, productive system. And if I wanted, I could throw in some passion fruit, and I could throw that, and they could go up my mangoes, you know, and then I'll have passion fruit too, which my kids love. And that's a super easy system. I put that together in a day for 2 rows, less than a day. I had my boys help me. They're learning. Shot some content around it, so people want to shoot content too. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't need to look at, like, you know, we were documentarians. These are big documentaries, right? And there's so much work into all that. This is something super simple. People just want something to relate to, and they don't want to feel overwhelmed. So you can shoot something really, really easy. And oftentimes I overthink like content. Like, I still have my old mindset that has to be this big production instead of like people just want authenticity. So you can create that awesome, beautiful system with that.
Yeah, it's so true. People rather watch something, as you mentioned, authentic rather than a big production. And even yesterday, I was building a new compost area using some old pallets, and it didn't come out perfect. But my whole mindset at the end is it's better done than perfect. Same thing with uh, content. If someone wants to start putting out content of something that they love doing, it could be that, oh, maybe it's not the right video, or maybe I said something wrong. It doesn't matter. It's better done than perfect. Just upload
Mm,
it and you get better as you do it. Now,
yeah.
when you mentioned getting local mulch services, my only concern is, and see if you have any advice on that, is do you have any worries on that they get the mulch from a neighborhood, let's say like the tree trimmings, and
Hmm.
then that has been sprayed with some type of harmful chemical. Then when you
Sure.
put it in the ground, it will kill your plants or maybe stunt their growth.
Sure. I like text my local tree trimming guys. I text them all the time. So here's what tree trimming services. You can do chip drop, but they take forever. You could pay for mulch and maybe it's organic and they're telling you that. I don't you just have to trust them for that. I know my local tree trimmer guys. I just see them driving by, or like we're post hurricane, right? A lot of devastation, a lot of damage, but at the same time, a lot of material that I can get. Now, a lot of times when a tree trimming service takes on a tree, they have to pay to go dump it somewhere. And then that place charges you to buy that mulch. So you basically become a middle guy and they'll drop it off for free. I ask them, I'm like, hey, where's it from? In your professional opinion, is it good stuff? Or is there palms and stuff mixed into it? Does it look like that area was sprayed? I mean, you can lose your mind looking through there, or you can, um, you could just trust the guys that are the other experts. Also, with this new thing I got, we lost a huge oak tree, so they took it down and literally grinded that all up, and now it's right here and it's going back into the system. So it's another thing. Death becomes life. So that's a great question, and I think that's why we try to do as local. Like when we do jobs and we're bringing in compost or soil or we're bringing in mulch, we want to find the most localist people. And a lot of times we'll go on Craigslist and stuff. We'll go Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace because sometimes it's a local farmer or it's someone local that's doing stuff. We love to support the community and help people there, and you create great connections because we work all over the state. So I know when I go here, I got these are my three top guys, and I can always go back to them. And then they recommend other guys. So that's a great question, but the more local, the better. And obviously, we can't control who's spraying what. It's just a disgusting part of our system. And wherever you go, people are spraying, but you do the best that you can.
Yes, the key thing is staying local and then building relationships so that then you could ask those tough questions, build that trust, and they're going to be honest with you because they know they could count on you to save money instead of
Yep.
having to go to the dump. Now I know time is the most essential thing, but I'm gonna sneak in one last question,
But
and is when starting papaya from seed, you started, I started a bunch of papayas from seed, and right now in my backyard I have like 20 or 30. But then I'm having a hard time deciding on which ones to put in the ground because I don't know which ones are female, male that are going to actually produce fruit. Do you have any advice on that?
So I could take you outside right now, but I basically have a bunch of 7 gallons. I find like a papaya that like blows my mind that the tree is like incredible. I'll take all those seeds. Sometimes it's like 300 seeds, right? I'll put them in a pot and I'll just let them go. The best looking ones, like I just relocated 100 papayas around my property yesterday. The best looking ones, I'll just start planting them everywhere. The ones that look the healthiest, strongest, whatever, I'll plant them everywhere. If they survive, amazing. The great thing about papayas is in like 4, 5, 6 months, you start to get production. You'll know if it's a male or a female. So if I have to take it out, whatever. But I have over 1,000 papayas growing right now, either in containers or just everywhere because they produce so well. But I think just don't be afraid to plant. You can never like really overplant because you can always pull things out. Like that's the thing. I used to be so curated. It has to be this, this, this. But if that doesn't produce, I just wasted a whole year instead of planting like 4 or 5 of those things. And the one that doesn't work, I take them out. So you're getting like the best genetics, essentially. So I just say plant. And here's the thing about papaya. So you just say if you buy a papaya, it's like $1.99 a pound. You get a 5-pound papaya, $10. So for $10, you go to the store. If you buy it, or you can just get it anywhere or trade or whatever. You eat that papaya, it's delicious. And you cut that up, it's about 300 seeds. About 90% of those seeds are going to germinate. They're going to turn into like little trees. Now, if you put them in like a 7-gallon, they're all growing all over the place, you try to remove them too young, they're going to die. So I wait until they're about 7-8 inches tall. Then I will slowly dig in and remove them, and I'll put them into separate pots, or I'll direct sow them into the ground. The thing is that, and I told my son this, I'm like, look, and this is a great lesson for anybody who's like, how do I make money growing food? How do I teach my kids lessons? Like all these things. This is a great one for my son as far as learning money. And then it also helped me because I was in a place of, how am I going to make money doing X, Y, Z? And I was getting into this negative space. And when I showed him this lesson, I was actually learning along the way. But we took this papaya, 300 seeds, we plant all these. I go, okay, look, now those seeds, we're going to have just say 300 plants. All those plants grow, and we can have them. Okay. So we went to the nursery, and I was like, okay, each one of these papaya trees for something like 3 feet are like $15. I'm like, so it's $15 per tree. Now, how many trees do we get? Now, 300 times 15. So he sits and does it. I makes him do the math by pencil. He does the math. He's like, wow, that's like X amount of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, X amount of thousand, and it takes no time to do it. Like, this is a couple hours of our time, and look how much money you can make. And then I went to a couple nurseries. I'm like, look who's selling them. No one's really selling these things. So what does it look like to corner that market wherever you are and to sell and grow? Look how much money, look how much productivity you can have just from one. And I think that the beauty is just one seed can create all this abundance, no matter what it is, because you can keep those trees, and now you're getting all these papayas. You're selling them for $2 a pound. They're 5 pounds each. You're making $10. You get 40 papayas. 10 times 40, like look how much money you're starting to pull now. So when we think of abundance that way, it's almost like Abraham, right? It's this one man that God chooses to start, that you are now my chosen people, and your descendants are going to outnumber the stars. And one man looks and goes, I'm almost 100. How the heck is that supposed to happen? Now we look, not only, the Jewish people, but now look through Yeshua, like look, now everybody's included in that. And I feel like that's so much of, if you just look at them as papayas, it's all papayas. But once you start chopping, dropping, and putting that in the system, now that starts to feed everything. That's like the Gentiles, you know what I mean? Now everything's included in that one papaya. It now just fed this entire system that is forever abundant.
Grafted into his nation. And not only that, but papayas have great digestive benefits. So I love papaya in that sense.
So healthy, so good for you.
And we didn't touch too much on the abundance part, but hopefully I could have you join in the future for another podcast episode, and we could talk more about abundance, how you just mentioned. Yeah. And before we disconnect, do you have, how can people get in contact with you, and do you have any upcoming projects or events that you would like to invite people to?
Yeah, actually, let me throw one thing out while we're talking about abundance here. I think that the medical system, while it serves purposes, I think it has kept us in a scarcity mindset over an abundance mindset of how we eat, that we need medicine, and it goes back to the accountability. Like, we don't want to be accountable to change our foods or change our diets or to change our lifestyle. We're just going to take this pill or this shot or whatever it is. So I see the abundance in when you grow food, you can start to see that your life starts to shift for something better. So one of the things that we also do is we'll take somebody like, okay, what is your medical condition? Whether it's high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever. Here are plants that these prohibit, or they help, or they cure it. Like, we can tell they cure it. So then we build a food forest integrating all those types of plants. So their food forest becomes their pharmacy. It becomes their gym, because now they're outside, they're planting, they're barefoot, and it becomes their inspiration because they're growing. Now they're feeling good. It's not in this sick, I'm dying. It's, man, I'm creating life. I'm being abundant and I'm giving back. And then it also, for so many people, it serves as a place where they do start to find God. They do start to see the details and the little things and how beautiful life is. And if you just throw this away or you don't look at the TV, like, there is no problems. What problems are you seeing? So that's a big thing when it comes to abundance, is just like the abundance of, just the seed. No matter what that metaphor is, just plant that seed and just watch the abundance. And then one more thing I just wanted to throw in, like we talk about like listening to God. Just ask God. I think a big thing is just ask God. Like, if you just look in the book of Matthew, I think it's Matthew 7, on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, and knock and the door shall be open. And a lot of people, I think, take that as like this manifesting thing, that like, oh, you do this and Jesus will give you this and God will give you these things. But in Mark, it says that in order for God to give you things, and you can move mountains, you can do anything, you can literally make anything happen, but then you can't do it unless you forgive. And I think abundance gets stifled when we don't forgive. And when we forgive, we're harboring in whatever these feelings are, whatever these emotions are, creating ailments. They're creating a mindset that isn't productive, that it's a death mindset. So when we're able to let go and forgive, and this is something I've really been working on, you could feel the tension, you could feel everything start to let go. So you can't have abundance without forgiveness, because that's like holding death inside of you. So I think that is such an amazing thing, where people have been looking to the Bible of when you ask God for things, he'll provide. And Jesus or Yeshua specifically says this, but in the book of Mark, you have to ask for forgiveness. You have to be able to forgive and love your enemies for this to work. Because it's not a selfish endeavor of like, I want this. It's love God, trust God, and love your neighbor. And when we do that, the miracles that start to happen, and I'm a perfect example for that. Like, sometimes my wife and I sit and we just get teary-eyed, like, how did we deserve all this? Like, why did God bless us with all this? And sometimes when I sit and I'm like, oh man, like, we're not making as much money as we want in our business, or this isn't happening, or I don't know how to do XYZ. I just sit back and I go, man, look at all the blessings. And I just start ripping them off. And then I find like it's just like overwhelming. And then I start thanking God for people. And then I start thanking God for this. And I think the abundance starts there. And then we can start to see that ripple out through the rest of our lives. So I'll leave you with that. As far as how you can communicate with us, you can check out our website, bringbacheden.co, like co. bringbacheden.co. We're on social media. I'm on social media at Matthew Nadu, N-A-D-U. And then we're at Bring Back Eden on social, bring.back.eden on social media. And then our YouTube is Bring Back Eden as well. And we're consistently putting content up on that. We just started that, but you can find blogs on our website, just a lot of information on this type of stuff. But we're always looking to be better. And, I have a bunch of buddies that they're really crushing the social media game. And sometimes I catch myself comparing, and it's like, hey, it's at our own pace, But we're going to start, I love that you got a school. We're going to start, we're going to do some courses where if you've worked with us, we have a community, like where we start a Telegram chat. So everybody can come together and ask questions and not feel stupid about asking questions. And then we can start to put people in different regions. So like, I planted this is working, this isn't working. So we can start to build this network of people where they just don't feel like we got a food forest, and now we have support now. So that's something we're really working on. As far as projects, we're always looking to, we can consult, we design, we install, all throughout the state of Florida. So there's nothing that we really can't work with you on or figure that out. And again, you can see all that stuff on our website. And then my business partner at Cameron James Spirited on Instagram. He's a great inspiration. He's a great equal balance for me, or I see all the things that we need to fix, and then he helps see all the solutions, So we kind of balance each other out that way. But that's where we're going. We're always looking to do local stuff. So we really want to, if you know a church or a school or a community or anything where we should be growing food, particularly churches. Like, why is every church not the Garden of Eden? Like, we do these canned food drives and stuff, and it's like, no offense, but people are getting the cheapest stuff they can to donate, and it's really, and the intention is good, but it could be better. So how do we start teaching our faith communities on how to grow food and really be stewards of the land and be that example for people who might not understand or want to understand or have a misconception of who we are? Let's be abundant as, the body of Christ.
Man, Matthew, that was awesome. Having a conversation with you, getting to know you. So many different topics that we hit. And again, I would love to have you back in the future, maybe also with your partner, Cameron. And forgiveness, as you mentioned, I think it would be like a good way to close it, right? Forgiving ourselves and forgiving others is a big part of growth and healing. So, once again, Matthew, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, everybody. Godspeed.